through the 24 hours of each day, aircraft of the Royal Air Force, in cooperation with the Dominion and Allied air forces, are attacking Hitler's fortress of Europe. On aerodromes all over Britain during the hours of daylight, bombers and crews of the 2nd Tactical Air Force are preparing to take off and strike blows in the pre-invasion softening up of occupied territory. As darkness falls, the engines of the heavy bombers of Bomber Command start up to complete the non-stop offensive, which the Royal Air Force is carrying out with devastating effect. Targets which must be attacked and destroyed before the Allied armies can set foot in Western Europe are scattered over a vast area and affect the whole Nazi military machine. Defenses of every kind, special anti-invasion weapons, big coastal batteries, gun sites and shore defenses, E-boat pens and hideouts, railway centers, engine repair shops and rolling stock, industry of every kind which helps to arm the German forces. These are the targets which are being destroyed so as to paralyze them our invading forces. And so all day and all night, aircraft of the Allied air forces are in the air carrying out this vital work. It is the purpose of this film to place on record the part played by the bombers of the Royal Air Force in this offensive, the beginning of the Second Front. We are destroying the Nazi defenses, special anti-invasion weapons, gun sites, E-boat pens and hideouts, defenses which Hitler has been building and strengthening the length of the Atlantic Wall. The German anti-invasion weapons are well concealed and hard to locate, but the Royal Air Force is seeking them out wherever they may be and smashing them one by one. The coasts themselves are certainly well defended by gun sites and E-boats, with which Hitler hopes to interfere with our landing operations. These targets are being subjected to a relentless bombing. are destroying the railway centres, engine repair shops and rolling stock, and so hindering the movement of German troops and supplies. Hitler will have to rely on the network of railways in occupied Europe to move troops and supplies rapidly to wherever our forces attack. It is the aim of the Allied air forces to see that the railways cannot carry the peak load for the Germans to repel our invasion. And so we bomb them. It is estimated that already Hitler has had to withdraw 50,000 skilled railwaymen from Germany to end the chaos on the French and Belgian railways caused by Allied attacks. We are destroying the sources in occupied Europe of Hitler's armaments. Factories making aero engines and aircraft parts, so vital to Goering's Luftwaffe. Powder factories and ammunition dumps for the German forces. Rubber works providing the much needed rubber for the Nazi mechanized divisions. Through the bombing of Germany, Hitler has been forced to use armament factories in occupied territory, and so the Royal Air Force seeks them out wherever they may be, marks them and bombs them at night with deadly precision. And in the daytime, power stations supplying electricity for factories and railways, steelworks and locomotive works. This list can have no end until the Germans give in. This air assault by the Royal Air Force, in close cooperation with the Dominion and Allied air forces, is an ever-growing headache for Hitler, and the fury of these air blows will increase until the day that the liberating forces of the United Nations destroy for all time the tyranny which has blooded Europe for more than 10 years. One of the reasons why we were able to gain a tactical surprise over the enemy when we landed in Normandy on June 6 was that his radar stations had been the object of determined attacks by our fighter bombers and rocket-firing Typhoons. Our Typhoons flew more than 1,600 sorties, firing over 4,500 60-pound rockets. The German Air Force was conspicuous by its absence during the days following our landing in Normandy. And for this we must thank the squadrons of Fighter Command, who kept up a non-stop watch over the beaches and convoys. Between June 6 and June 12, 10,000 sorties were flown. By D+4, the first landing strip was available to our fighters for refueling and emergency landings. The enemy's attempts to interfere with our shipping were frustrated by the vigilance of Coastal Command. On June 9, a destroyer on its way to attack Allied cross-channel shipping was driven aground by the Navy or field to bats, and then attacked by 24 bow fighters of Coastal Command with rockets and bombs. On July 6, 41 bow fighters of Coastal Command, with torpedoes, rockets and cannons, attacked a convoy of 8 merchant vessels with 11 escort ships off the Frisian Islands. 1 merchant vessel was hit by a torpedo, 1 was set on fire by rockets, and 4 escort vessels were left burning. On June 10, 72 Mitchells of No. 2 Group, each carrying 8 500-pound bombs, attacked enemy troops and headquarters at La Cane. The bombing was accurate, and it is known that a general and 13 of his staff were killed. There was no flak. On June 12, 24 Bostons and 72 Mitchells of No. 2 Group bombed enemy troop concentrations and ammunition dumps in the forest of Grim Bosque. Bombing was good, and enemy transport was forced to evacuate the wood. Accurate heavy flak met the bombers. Attack on June 14 by Mitchells and Bostons of No. 2 Group on petrol dumps at Con-sur-Vire, a large explosion was observed in the target area. On the night of June 14-15, Bomber Command Lancasters made 2 attacks on the port area of Le Havre, dropping more than 1,200 tons of bombs, including some 12,000-pounders. The object of the attack was to destroy U-boats and other craft which were operating against our beachhead. Much shipping was destroyed and the harbour installations damaged. On June 17, Mitchells and Bostons of No. 2 Group carried out an attack on the marshalling yards at Mézidon, through which the enemy was bringing supplies and troops to the Normandy front. Bombing was very accurate on the aiming point, and many large explosions were seen. Much permanent way was destroyed or damaged, and accurate heavy flak was encountered by our bombers. Attack on June 22 on the old steelworks at Caen, which the enemy were using as a strong point, Mitchells and Bostons of No. 2 Group carried out some of the most accurate bombing of the war. The attack was carried out at the request of the army, and direct hits were scored on the aiming point. Intense and accurate heavy flak met the bombers. July 18, 1,056 aircraft of Bomber Command attacked enemy troop concentrations in the Caen area in 5 waves, dropping over 5,000 tons of bombs in great concentration. The attack was carried out from between 6,000 and 10,000 feet and resulted in our troops being able to advance almost immediately afterwards. Chief signal store for the German Air Force in France at Saint-Cyr was attacked on July 25 by Lancaster's Bomber Command. This target had been attacked before, but repairs had been made, and the works moved to the military college, which was the main object of this attack. On July 28, Lancaster's and Halifax's Bomber Command attacked enemy troop concentrations in the Ville-Bocage, Kermonjurk area to enable our troops to move forward in alignment with the Americans. To destroy rail facilities and stop traffic in the marshalling yard at Joigny-la-Roche, Lancaster's Bomber Command attacked on July 31 with good results. Between December 5, 1943 and the end of September 1944, Bomber Command dispatched more than 16,000 aircraft in their offensive against the flying bomb, dropping nearly 100,000 tons of bombs. The targets were often well camouflaged and difficult to find, and so accurate ground marking was necessary. On August 5, Lancaster's and Halifax's Bomber Command dropped more than 2,200 tons on a flying bomb supply depot at Saint-Leu-d'Esseron. Very heavy cratering of the area resulted, with roads blocked and the railway destroyed. The caves at this depot collapsed after further attacks. Great work in defending this country against the flying bomb was done by our fighters, which in the months of June, July, August and September destroyed more than 1,900, like this. June and July, rocket-firing Typhoons of the 2nd Tactical Air Force flew more than 6,400 sorties against a variety of targets, including tanks, armored transport, enemy headquarters, airfields and communications, firing some 38,700 rockets. Important in July and August were the attacks carried out by the Mitchells and Bostons and No. 2 Group, 2nd Tactical Air Force, on enemy troop concentrations and fuel and ammunition dumps. These dumps were vital links of supply between Germany and her armies in the field, and 2 Group flew nearly 3,000 sorties with good results. July 6, a fuel dump at Argentan. July 12, an ammunition dump at Chartres. July 17, a fuel dump at Alençon. July 17, a fuel dump at Saint-Malo. The enemy put up a smoke screen to minimize the effect of the attack, but without success. July 25, troop concentration southeast of Caen. July 25, an ammunition dump at Châteaudun. July 26, an ammunition dump at Alençon. August 2, an ammunition dump at Montreuil-Belfroid. On July 21, 39 bow fighters of Coastal Command, with torpedoes, rockets and cannons, attacked a convoy of 9 merchantmen, protected by more than 20 escort vessels off Heligoland. 3 merchant ships were hit by torpedoes, and 2 armed trawlers and a minesweeper were left burning. Intense flak, including parachute projectiles, was put up by the enemy. Low-level attacks on enemy headquarters and similar targets were carried out during July and August by Mosquitoes and No. 2 Group, 2nd Tactical Air Force. These attacks were made with great precision and invariably surprised the enemy by the speed and accuracy with which they were carried out, the aircraft literally placing their bombs on the buildings. On July 30, Mosquitoes attacked a chateau in the Brest Peninsula, which was being used by German U-boat crews as a rest center. It was planned to carry out the attack before 8 o'clock in the morning, in order to ensure that all the occupants were in the building. Weather conditions were clear on the route to the target, but there was cloud at 300 feet and limited visibility in the target area. The attack was made from minimum altitude, and bombs were seen to burst on the building. It has been reported that almost all the occupants of the chateau were killed in this attack. On August 2, Mosquitoes attacked a chateau south of Châtellerault. This chateau was known to house SS troops. As it was of solid construction, 18 Mosquitoes were used, and it was decided to scatter the attack to the fringes of the surrounding wood, where the enemy had sited tents. It is believed that at least 28 bombs hit the building, and it is known that many outbuildings were gutted by fire. Attack on August 8 by Lancaster's Bomber Command on the railway bridge at Etaples, severe damage was done to the embankment and the tracks were breached and disrupted. This attack was carried out to prevent the movement of large enemy reserves to the Normandy front. On August 12, Lancaster's Bomber Command attacked the U-boat pens at Brest, using some 12,000-pound bombs. A number of direct hits were scored, and in one case the concrete roof was pierced to a considerable depth. 5 direct hits were scored on an adjoining naval school. On August 14, 812 aircraft of Bomber Command made a very concentrated attack on enemy troop concentrations in the Pontigny area in support of the 1st Canadian Army. over 4,700 tons of bombs were dropped with good results. On August 15, 1,002 aircraft of Bomber Command attacked 9 airfields in Holland and Belgium. The object of these attacks was to ground and destroy the enemy's day and night fighters. Among the airfields attacked were Gils and Ryan and Deelen airfields in Holland. After the attack on Gils and Ryan, 800 craters were observed on the landing ground. A total of 5,218 tons of bombs were dropped. On August 27, 174 Lancasters of Bomber Command attacked the port of Königsberg with high explosive and incendiaries. As a result of this attack, and 3 nights later, 40% of the total built-up area was gutted by fire, and at least 44 warehouses were destroyed. To immobilize coastal gun batteries, on the island of Cézanne, off the port of Saint-Malo, 165 Halifaxes and 5 Mosquitoes of Bomber Command dropped 800 tons of high explosive on August 31. Very severe cratering resulted from this successful attack. In the late afternoon of September 10, 931 Lancasters, Halifaxes and Mosquitoes of Bomber Command attacked 8 defended areas near Le Havre. Attacks such as these, carried out by Bomber Command, greatly assisted the army in clearing the Germans from the Channel ports, which they were tenaciously holding. At the time of this attack, the town of Le Havre was surrounded by the Canadian army, and following the bomber support, the Canadians occupied the town. September 11, Lancasters of Bomber Command attacked the synthetic oil installation at Carmin. Some 4,000-pound bombs were dropped, and the oil plant suffered the most extensive damage and was out of action for 5 months. At the time of the attack, this plant was producing 8,500 tons a month. Columns of smoke rose to nearly 16,000 feet during the attack and cast a dark shadow over the whole surrounding area. September 15, 22 Lancasters of Bomber Command, carrying 12,000-pound tall boy bombs, attacked the 45,000-ton German battleship Tirpitz at her anchorage in Kar Fjord. On the run-up, small amounts of low cloud made bombing difficult, and a huge smoke screen, put into operation not more than 8 minutes before the attack, soon obscured the target. the Lancasters flew from a Russian base to make this attack, which was carried out from between 13,500 and 17,500 feet. In spite of the formidable smoke screen, covering not only the turrets but all the surrounding area, in this attack the battleship received a direct hit forward on the starboard side. Between the beginning of August 1944 and the end of December of that year, Typhoons of the 2nd Tactical Air Force flew over 31,000 sorties, firing some 11,000 rockets against enemy barges, motorized transport, gun positions, and other strong points in close support of our armies. On August 8, 15 Mosquitoes of No. 2 Group, 2nd Tactical Air Force, attacked a large school at Eglinton, in which 300 German troops were holding out against the Maquis. At least 20 direct hits were scored, and after the attack, the Maquis captured the building and those Germans who survived the attack. On September 13, 72 Mitchells and Bostons of No. 2 Group went to Boulogne to liquidate enemy strong points around the town. At this time, extensive demolitions were being rapidly carried out by the Germans in Boulogne. All positions were accurately hit with bombs. Between October 14, 1944 and January 14, 1945, No. 2 Group carried out 940 sorties against bridges in front of 21 Army Group. In spite of bad weather, the campaign against the main river crossings effectively held up the arrival of German reserves. We show here two successful attacks carried out October 28 on a bridge at Roermond and another at Deventer. Following the breakthrough by German armies under Field Marshal Rundstedt on September 15, Mitchell's and Boston's No. 2 Group carried out a number of important attacks to create choke points in the enemy lines and destroy any concentration of enemy troops. Typical of these attacks were those on December 23 at Schmidheim. December 24 at Recht. January 1, 1945 at Dasburg. Between August and December 1944, the Mosquito and Beaufighter squadrons of Coastal Command were active in attacks on enemy shipping in Dutch, French and Norwegian waters. During this period, they carried out over 5,800 sorties. With their inland routes made too hazardous by Allied bombing, the Germans hoped to send troops and supplies by sea along the coast of occupied Europe. These pictures are proof of the accuracy and devastating power of the attacks by which Coastal Command effectively interfered with this practice. September 17, 1944, more than 350 RAF Sterlings, Halifaxes, Albemarles and Dakotas, with paratroops, Hamilcar, Horsa and Waco gliders, flew to Holland as part of a great Allied air fleet, carrying more than 39,000 men, 11,000 of them to Arnhem. The Germans had flooded large areas of Holland so as to prevent the movement of our ground troops, but they had not bargained for this great airborne operation, Operation Market, which was to land our troops in front of the ground forces and capture and hold important strategic bridges at Arnhem, Nijmegen, Grave, and in the Eindhoven area. The film shows the flight of the aircraft to Arnhem and the dropping of paratroops and the landing of gliders in that area on the first day of Operation Market. The bridges at Nijmegen, Grave, and Eindhoven were held by the airborne forces until the ground troops arrived. But at Arnhem, after a magnificent fight, in the face of tremendous enemy pressure, our airborne forces were unable to hold on. Nevertheless, the operation as a whole was a great contribution to the Allied cause at that time. same day, September 17, 765 aircraft of Bomber Command attacked enemy strong points northeast of Boulogne in support of the ground forces. The attack was carried out in 8 waves on 8 separate aiming points, and 3,000 tons of bombs were dropped. Roads, buildings, and trench systems were obliterated. September 20, 648 aircraft of Bomber Command attacked enemy strong points in the Calais area. The area was heavily blanketed by bombs, especially around the heavy gun batteries, which received direct hits. Minefields were partially detonated, and all roads in the area were blocked. On October 11, Lancasters of Bomber Command attacked gun positions at Flushing. The aircraft attacked in one wave in line astern. The target area of 16 bunkers was saturated with bombs, causing very severe damage to all the gun emplacements. Bombs also damaged sunken roads and accommodation in the target area. On October 14, over 1,000 aircraft of Bomber Command attacked 4 aiming points at Duisburg, including the Thyssen Steelworks, with the object of destroying dispersed intact areas of the town. Cloud obscured the target area when the bombers arrived, but over 4,700 tons of high explosive and incendiaries were dropped, including some 8,000-pounders. Great devastation was caused by this highly successful attack. On the night of October 14, Bomber Command Lancasters and Mosquitoes attacked the industrial town of Brunswick, a center of the aircraft industry. The target was marked from low level, and the rapid build-up of the attack can be clearly seen as the incendiaries burst throughout the built-up area, setting ablaze every part of the town. Tremendous destruction resulted from this attack, the old town completely leveled by fire and blast. Now as the attack develops, the pattern of the street stands out clearly, outlined by the raging fires. October 29, Lancasters of Bomber Command carried out their second attack on the battleship Tirpitz, which had been moved to Tromsø Fjord after the attack on September 15, when a direct hit was scored with a 12,000-pound bomb. Cloud in the area made the bombers' task very difficult on this occasion, and strong opposition came from the battleship. On November 12, 29 Lancasters with 12,000-pound bombs carried out the third and last attack on the Tirpitz. On this occasion, the weather was clear, and as the aircraft went into attack, all the guns of the great ship blazed away, but to no avail. 2 or 3 direct hits were scored, and shortly after the attack, the battleship capsized. On November 16, in support of the U.S. 9th Army, Bomber Command attacked the town of Düren to destroy buildings containing ammunition and troops, and to block road and rail intersections. As a result of this highly successful attack, the town was denied the Germans as a military center. night of December 4, Bomber Command carried out a concentrated attack on the communications center of Heilbronn to destroy rail facilities and dispersed industries in the built-up area. Flares were dropped to light the target, and some 12,000-pound bombs were among those dropped. Very severe devastation resulting, with at least 9 industrial plants severely damaged. As in the attack on Brunswick, the rapid build-up of the raid can be clearly seen as incendiaries burst on the town and the fires take hold. January the 1st, 1945, and May the 8th of that year, typhoons of the 2nd Tactical Air Force flew over 20,800 sorties in Western Europe against enemy troops, transport, gun positions and shipping, giving the closest support to our ground forces. Another powerful striking force in the 2nd Tactical Air Force were the Tempest squadrons, which between January the 1st and May the 8th flew over 7,500 sorties, attacking and destroying enemy trains, transport, headquarters and aircraft. March and April 1945, the Mitchells and Bostons of No. 2 Group 2nd Tactical Air Force were engaged in attacking rail centers in western Germany and the Ruhr, continuing their policy of rail interdiction. Villages forming enemy choke points were also systematically attacked. These targets had a direct bearing on the battles in progress at that time. Rail interdiction at Halter, rail interdiction at Dolmen, troop concentration at Resfeld, enemy strong point at Heverdorf, the Mosquitoes of No. 2 Group 2nd Tactical Air Force were active by day and night, bombing and strafing all visible signs of movement, by road and rail as far east as Berlin. In addition, Gestapo headquarters buildings were the objects of two notable low-level pinpoint attacks. One on March 21 at Copenhagen, when the building was completely destroyed, and the second shown here at Odense on April 4, in which 6 Mosquitoes took part. Half the building is being completely destroyed, and the rest very severely damaged. Between January the 1st, 1945 and May the 8th of the same year, the Beaufighter and Mosquito squadrons of Coastal Command carried out over 5,500 sorties against enemy shipping. The majority of the attacks were against shipping in Norwegian waters, where the shipping routes along the coast take the place of roads and railways. These attacks by Coastal Command certainly played a major part in hamstringing the German communications in Norway in the last months of the war, and were undoubtedly one of the main reasons why the German garrison surrendered to the Allies without being able to strike a blow. February the 2nd, 1945, Lancaster's Bomber Command attacked the midget submarine pens at Putershafen, dropping 12,000-pound bombs. Bombing was carried out in clear weather from between 12,700 and 14,000 feet on this small target, and many direct hits were scored. February 23, a night attack was carried out by 362 Lancasters and 13 Mosquitoes on the important communications and industrial centre of Pforzheim in the Upper Rhineland. There was considerable fighter activity, but bombing was highly concentrated. An examination of this target has proved that this was one of the most accurate attacks ever made by Bomber Command. On March 14, Lancasters of Bomber Command attacked the railway viaduct at Bielefeld, using the 22,000-pound bomb for the first time. The arrow will point to the spot where the bomb will strike. There is the spot. There is the crater, and there is the explosion. This viaduct was attacked as part of a plan for bottling up the German armies in the Ruhr. These pictures taken immediately after the attack show 6 spans destroyed and severe damage to the embankment leading to the viaduct. On March 16, the railway and industrial centre of Würzburg was the object of a night attack by Bomber Command. Results were excellent, and great devastation was caused by fire. Only 212 Lancasters were used in this operation, which is a good example of the increased striking power and accuracy of Bomber Command attacks at this time. On March 19, the viaduct at Arnsberg was attacked by Lancasters of Bomber Command, using 6 22,000-pound bombs. This viaduct was one of the 3 main ways of escape out of the Ruhr left to the Germans, and so the attack was clearly related to that carried out on March 14 at Bielefeld. Reconnaissance pictures taken after the attack show that 2 spans of this viaduct were smashed, and a direct hit was scored on the mouth of the tunnel into which the railway runs at one end. On April 7, 15 Lancasters of Bomber Command attacked a ship at Moiden, which the Germans were preparing to sink in order to block the approaches to the port. 12,000-pound bombs were used, and the attack was completely successful. On April 9, 2 attacks on Hamburg were carried out simultaneously by Bomber Command, one on the submarine pens and the second on oil installations. 5 penetrations of the submarine pens were obtained, and very severe damage was done to the oil installations. On April 18, nearly 1,000 aircraft of Bomber Command, escorted by Mustangs and Spitfires of Fighter Command, made a heavy and concentrated attack on the naval base and fortress island of Heligoland, whose guns guarded the approaches to Hamburg and Bremen. An airfield on the island of Duna, 3/4 of a mile away, was also attacked and saturated with bombs. In these attacks, every gun but one was put out of action. And on the following day, a small force of 19 bombers made a further attack with 12,000 and 22,000-pound bombs, and this one gun was then effectively silenced. On April the 25th, 1945, Bomber Command carried out its last heavy attack of the war on Berchtesgaden, Hitler's retreat in Bavaria. The three targets were Hitler's chalet, the SS barracks and defense control center, and the famous Eagle's Nest. In spite of strong defenses, direct hits were observed on the chalet. Bombing was very concentrated in the whole target area, with smoke rising to 10,000 feet, and severe damage was done to all the targets.